Hello there. Welcome to my channel, and in particular this series, which will be on the Viwoods AiPaper Mini. Now, just for clarification, this is a relatively new company. I've heard other YouTubers call it Viwoods, and I've been calling it Viwoods, which I kind of prefer. I don't know which is the right pronunciation, but it's not unusual for me to pronounce things wrong, so that's kind of consistent. So I think I'm just going to go with the one that I like the most, unless corrected otherwise. So we'll just call it Viwoods from here on out. Now I'm going to spend a little bit of time doing a little bit of groundwork in this video before we start to actually get to looking at the device itself. And I think that groundwork is helpful and important, but of course I know a lot of people don't want to listen to that. They just want to jump to the parts that they are most interested in, which of course is fine. And to that end, I create a lot of chapters in my video so that you can just go right to the information you're interested in. So I just want to remind you that this video has those chapters, and if you want to jump around, then please avail yourself of those. Otherwise, let's go ahead and start setting the stage. So to start, I thought we would kind of talk about how we got to this point where I've got a device to review. And I guess it started in the beginning of July. There was an article posted in Good e-Reader. It was the first time I'd ever heard of Viwoods. And it was basically just describing this product that's about to come out. And I remember being very unimpressed by it. I remember thinking the specs were fairly standard, not bad, but nothing of out of the unusual. And the article just didn't do anything to grab me. I swiftly forgot about it. It wasn't until toward the end of the month in July that I ran across, I was going through Reddit and the subreddit forums, as I usually do, just to check out what's going on. And I ran across some post, I don't even remember what it was related to. It wasn't Viwoods, but there was a comment in that post that talked about some excitement about the Viwoods company. It had a link. That link took me to one of Viwoods' web pages, and that's kind of where I started to really kind of look into this company. I was pretty impressed with what I saw. They had two web pages in particular. I talk about this in a little more detail in a previous video, but the basic idea here is there were a couple of things that impressed me about it. So the first thing that was intriguing was just this idea of bringing in AI into the device. AI, of course, for many is a buzzword, but to me, large language models and note-taking can have a natural synergy, so it's easy for me to see how this might be useful. I don't know if it will be in the end, but it's at least grabbing my attention to wanting to learn more about that. So that was kind of the first thing. But the other thing that kind of grabbed me was just how impressively they seemed to be going after the remarkable audience. And this was reflected both in their slick presentations and in their videos where people are kind of using the device in ways that's easily identifiable and relatable. But also in just the basic UI of the Viwoods note-taking app. I mean, they pretty much took the remarkable UI. And indeed, a lot of the functionality that we've come to learn that the device can do is pretty much matches one for one what the remarkable does, with some minor exceptions. For example, remarkable appears to have more pen styles and more templates, so it's not exact, but a lot of the basic functionality is the same. The point of this being is that Viwoods was really clear in this marketing material and how they were structuring the device, what they were going after. And so it impressed me that they had that focus, but it also impressed me that they were going after the right market. I mean, the remarkable market is probably the biggest market out there. It's arguable if more remarkables or more scribes have been sold. There's just too opaque in the sales numbers to know. But remarkable certainly is one of the top-selling devices of all time. There's no question about that. And its market is clearly the biggest, again, save for potentially Amazon. This is particularly interesting in contrast to the recently released BooksGo 10.3, which really went after remarkable as well, but I think ultimately failed in that regard. And it's not that the device was bad. I did a whole video series ultimately recommending it, and a lot of people really like that device, not surprisingly. It's just that goal of going after remarkable really wasn't met, because while the Go had the specs that beat remarkable at every turn, the UI, despite the new iconography that did look better and was a little more remarkable-like on the skin, it still had a note-taking app and a reading app that was really complex, really cluttered. which is the opposite of what Remarkable does. And I said in that video, I didn't think that the Go was going to compete against the Remarkable because ultimately it was a different device. And the sales numbers appear to bear that out. Now, this is, again, very difficult to get any actual numbers, but you can go into the Amazon website and you can see some other sales numbers for the past month if a particular device is selling enough units. The Remarkable units over the past month, they've had like 3 different kinds of bundles. Combined, they've sold about 5,000 to 7,000 units of Remarkable. The Go has sold 500 plus, so probably 500 to 1,000. So we see in that snapshot alone, not only is the Remarkable selling at least 5 times the level of the Go, but it's even more striking when you consider the fact that the Go is 2 months old and the Remarkable is 4 years old. So again, my point isn't that the Go as a device is a failure, not at all. My point is, as a competitor to Remarkable, it couldn't deliver the goods because ultimately it was a different type of device than Remarkable users would be attracted to. Sure, some Remarkable users probably have gone over to the books or to Supernote, and some of those have gone to the Go, but in mass, it appears like those are 2 pieces of the marketplace, and the Go didn't really do a lot to change that dynamic. So that's what's interesting about Viwoods. They're going after Remarkable, and instead of just having the hardware, it looks like they have the software to do that as well. And whether they're successful or not, who knows? It's definitely an uphill battle. But the fact that they're very clear about what they're trying to do, to me, gave me some confidence in them as a company, at least conceptually. So I ended up backing their Kickstarter campaign for that reason. I backed the 10-inch model. And then I also created a video, which I alluded to just a little bit earlier, basically talking about what we know about the device so far, based on those marketing materials, and kind of where we were going. Based on that video, Viwoods reached out to me, so this is the first time we've ever connected with each other, and basically asked if I'd be willing to review one of their devices. I said yes. They said, we don't have any 10 inches anymore. I said, we only have the mini. I said, great, because I'm going to get the 10-inch anyway and review it, so that's perfect. Just go ahead and send me the mini. And that's basically how we got here. As always, or at least in the few cases where I have received a device from the manufacturer, I lay out my conditions in advance, and they're pretty similar, if not exact, to conditions you might have heard from other reviewers in this space, particularly things like I have full rights of what content goes in my videos. I'm not sharing my videos with the company until it's published, and then I'll share a link at that point. So things like that. And they were particularly fine with it, which I kind of read as that they've heard that from others as well. So that was kind of interesting. So that's where we are. So Viwoods is sending me a device. It's not clear if I get to keep it or not, but certainly they're giving me a device to review at a minimum, which I might be able to keep. We'll see. As of this filming, actually, I'm filming this in advance of getting the device, so I'll probably know more once I have receipt of it. Now, I do want to make an observation around some of the other videos that have taken place up till now, and I'll focus in particular on the Good e-reader video, which is probably the one that's been viewed the most. And that's created a lot of controversy. And I think part of the problem is Good e-reader presents their video as a review. Now, I've been around for a while, and as I've noted, I'm on Reddit quite often, and I'm very aware of Good e-reader and some of the issues that folks have had with them. And in particular, the most important thing I would say is that Good e-reader has an inherent conflict of interest in doing reviews because they run a store. I mean, that's kind of the basics of it. So anytime Good e-reader does a review, I don't really kind of take it very seriously. And I didn't consider the video they produced as a review. So for me, I considered it as a marketing demo, albeit one done by someone that wasn't part of the company. So what I liked about the video is a few things. Number one, I liked the fact that you could see a lot of the functionality, which wasn't necessarily shown in action in the other marketing materials. So that's the one thing. But the other thing is that Kickstarter campaigns tend to have, go one of two directions. It either goes in the direction of, here's a device or something we'd like to make, please give us money so we can develop it, which is usually pretty high risk. But then there's the use of Kickstarter as just part of your marketing campaign. You know, the product is pretty much there. We just want to kind of launch it through Kickstarter and start raising buzz. And you want the latter because the latter basically means the product is pretty much developed and you have a higher chance of getting it. And that definitely seems the case here. And the Good e-reader video reinforced that because there it was. You could see the device. It looked really good. You can see it function. And a lot of the functionality was displayed during the video. I've no doubt that there probably was some editing that maybe covered up certain things, particularly things that maybe aren't fully developed yet. So I'm not saying it was an objective review of the device. It was just good to see it out in the wild and so far along. And that's kind of gave me confidence as well in the campaign. So anyway, just wanted to put that into a bit of context. I don't see it as a review. And so I appreciated the video where I think other people looked at it like it was a serious review, which, you know, it isn't. and there's other videos too floating out there. But it's not just myself that the company has reached out to. I understand that Kit from Gorilla Physics is also going to be receiving the device. And there's other reviewers as well, I'm sure. So we'll start to see a lot more videos on this. I'm feeling pretty confident that there'll be a product that's sent out. What we don't know, of course, is how well does the product actually perform to the promises that it's making? You know, how functional is it really? How well does it execute? That's the question we don't really know, and hopefully we'll get a better sense through this review series, and of course, again, when the final versions come out starting in September. All right, so let's talk briefly about who Viwoods is. We don't know particularly much about it, but there is one interesting thing to point out. So first off, as again, it's a brand new company. These two products are the first two products they've ever released, as far as I know. What's interesting about them is they're located in Hong Kong. And I find that particularly interesting because that's only about 25 miles south of Shenzhen. Shenzhen is the location of the headquarters of both Books and Bigme. So here you've got, in a pretty small geographic area, 3 players in the e-ink note-taking market at least, and there might be other players there as well. Shenzhen is a particularly notable economic zone, so there might be other companies there as well related to this. I'm just not as sure about that. But it's unusual to have so many companies in one location, and I do wonder if Viwoods has kind of pilfered some of the talent from Bigme or Books onto their team. I don't know anything about that for sure. That's just a speculative idea, but it is an intriguing one given the geography. Now, to kind of continue with the geography lesson for today, or your geography fact of the day, if you take the Shenzhen, Hong Kong area and you go about 350 miles due east, you're going to run into the southern tip of Taiwan. And then if you go from the northern tip of Taiwan up to Shanghai, that's another 350 miles roughly, then that's the home of one of the headquarters for RADA or Supernote. And of course, Taiwan is the location of the E-Ink Corporation. So it's kind of an interesting triangle, which, by the way, has no like relevance or significance. I just thought it was kind of interesting. And since I was already kind of sharing some geography, I thought I'd throw that into the mix as well. But again, the most interesting thing is this concentration of those companies and whether it might be a transfer of talent between them. Now, the company itself, as I said earlier, is definitely focusing on Remarkable. And the best way to think of their devices, right now anyway, that they've been presented, is Remarkable with this AI integration and with some apps. So in some ways, if you think of Books and Supernote over here as some of the more complicated note-taking devices on the market, and you think of Remarkable as much simpler, but still a very highly functional, and there's quite a bit going on with Remarkable as well, but they're definitely on two sides of this continuum, then Viwoods is kind of over here. The app market is not the Google Play Store, so it's their own app market, so it's a subset of apps that you're able to download onto the device, has common reading apps on there and what have you, and we'll go through that as we go through the next video. But that's kind of the idea. Now, I say the starting point because the company's already indicated that they're going to be doing a lot of updates. And the case in point in particular is that they marketed the 10-inch and the 8-inch model, the Mini, that we're going to be reviewing here, as very similar. So it's almost like a Remarkable with AI and then a small Remarkable with AI. But since then, since the Kickstarter campaign has launched, they've actually announced in their second update that they're going to change the Mini to include front lighting, which the other 10-inch device doesn't have. So that's just an example of how they're kind of evolving what they're putting out there onto the marketplace. And that's another reason why I'm kind of interested in this company, because I'm seeing the potential for a lot of development. Obviously, no promises. Who knows what the future holds and all of those caveats. But there's a lot of interesting buzz coming from this company, and that addition of front lighting is an example of that. I'm getting a pre-production model of the Mini, so I'm not even sure if the version I'm going to have will have that front lighting or not. I kind of suspect not, but we'll take a look when it comes in. So it's kind of a dynamic environment. Okay, so I think that's all the context that we need, and we can just go ahead and get into the device itself. This video is going to focus particularly, I'll say unboxing, but we'll go pretty quickly through that because after all, it is a pre-production model, so the boxing really isn't that relevant to the final user experience. But we will unravel it just to see what the contents are. Look at that hardware, then we'll go ahead and give first impressions about that. Then we'll go ahead and go through the startup process, and then we'll stop the video there. The next video then will be we'll zero in on the software side, and we'll do what I call a visual tour, which is my normal process of doing these videos. Now, sometimes in really complicated devices, I'll split that video tour into two different videos, but I don't think we're going to need to here. I think this, because it's going along the Remarkable kind of simplicity in terms of its AI app and its settings, I think we'll be able to get through that easily in one video. And then I'm not as sure what I'll do beyond that, just because it is a pre-production model. Normally the third video focuses on the battery life. So I'll probably do that. I'll probably also start going a little deeper into how you interact with AI. So we'll do an overview on the visual tour, but go into detail on the next video. And then I might actually go full into the review on the next video, or I'll make that a fourth video. It just depends on how this stuff kind of comes together. And of course the review is contingent on the fact that the device will eventually change, but at least I'll talk about the pros and cons as it stands with whatever device that I'm given. So that's the plan, and hopefully it should be a fun series. Again, I think a really exciting company, a lot of promise, and I'm pretty interested to see how this develops, and I hope you are too, and let's start that journey. Okay, so here we have it. This is the Viwoods AiPaper Mini. This is a pre-production model. It's unclear how much change may take place between now and the release of the device through the Kickstarter campaign. And I understand the latest messaging on that campaign is that these would ship out in November. So we'll see what it looks like at that time. But we're just going to review what we have in front of us. This device actually came exactly like this, except it was packed in securely in bubble wrap. There was no unboxing to speak of, just the device itself. Let's go ahead and start with the cover. And the first thing I'll call attention to is the logo at the bottom. You've got the logo there, and it says Viwoods. I actually like the logo. There's not a lot of nice logos in the e-note-taking space. Obviously, it's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but it does add a little bit to it, which I appreciate. The cover itself is a synthetic leather. So, visually you can kind of see it's got that leather kind of design. The feel of it is fine. There's nothing particularly notable about the feel on the outside. In fact, the first thing I really noticed about it when I first took it out of the packaging really isn't the cover itself, but it's just how light everything was. And we'll do an actual weigh-in to get the actual specs on that before we get into the setup process. But that's what really stood out more than anything, is that weight, given the 8-inch size. It still has a bit of heft to it. This is not a 7 or 6-inch e-reader. There's more going on here. But still, for its size, for the 8-inch class, that was definitely a surprise. If we open this up, the first thing we'll notice is that, yes, this version does have front lighting. So we'll get to that in a bit. Turn that back off. but still focusing on the cover. It is a softer inside to the cover, a fairly thin cover, and then the loop is the same material as the inside of the case. The one thing I'll note that if you fold the cover over, and we'll do this in a cutaway, but there is a slight rise, so the device is slightly tilted up, and that presumably actually would help in certain situations with reflections from lighting. So that's probably a good thing, but it's certainly oriented, obviously, for writers who are right-handed. If we go ahead and pull the device out of the case, one of the interesting things I've noted about this is that there is no magnet along the spine. This is just a plastic spine. It's almost just a guide for the device. The magnets themselves are actually located here on the corners and then here in the middle. They're strongest on the corners, and you have weaker magnets in the middle. So let's go ahead and remove the stylus for a second. So the idea is you just guide it in, you go like that, and then the device hangs in there fairly securely, but I wouldn't whip it around too hard. I think it could dislodge fairly easily, but I feel it's secure enough in the case. The stylus does also have a magnetic attachment to the device, so we have a loop, but we could also just use the stylus with the flat side against the device, and it's pretty secure. I mean, if I wanted to, I could flip this off as well, but I would say it's pretty secure. And those magnets actually work when you're in the loop as well. So you can connect it in the loop, and the magnets can connect if the flat side is oriented toward the device. So that stylus is definitely not going anywhere. Just to finish off on the device itself, let's take a look at the back. There we go. So a very metallic back, and you've got the Viwoods in silver, and there's your AiPaper Mini and your certifications. Along the sides, on the top, you have a fingerprint button up here, and that's a nice thick power button. You've got nothing on the sides. And then on the bottom, let me flip this over, you have a USB-C port here, you've got a power indicator here, and you can see here on top, there's two microphone buttons. We've got our haptic buttons, which are smaller than I thought they would be. So that was I think that's nice to have them in a smaller icon. And I'm not sure how that will compare on the 10-inch model, but they're definitely kind of tiny here, which I appreciate. Okay, a few more comments about the hardware. First off, there is this kind of metal band that runs around the edges of the device. I felt all along it. It's very smooth. No rough points. I've also pressed around the edges. There's no creaking. So the device appears particularly well made. The stylus itself has Viwoods on the end. It has an end cap eraser. It has a button. The nibs are interesting. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and use this remarkable removal tool. And we'll go ahead and go in there and pull it out. There we go. All right, and you'll notice that in addition to the plastic nib itself, you can see the tip and the end of the shaft there, there's this metal sheath that's around it. I've never seen nibs with that before. This is the first time, and so this tells me this is probably a proprietary style. So when you need replacements, you'll need to buy them from Viwoods, unless I'm mistaken on that front. So just something to keep in mind. Go ahead and put that back in. See if I can do it. There we go. Another thing to note is that the tip does retract. I don't know if you can see this on the screen or not. We'll use this as an example. But the tip of the nib does give. So if I put pressure on it, you can see it pushes in. Okay, one last point around the stylus before we start taking a couple measurements is the flat side of the stylus. It's mostly rounded except for this one flat edge, which is pretty normal. It does have this interesting kind of dip here, which happens just before the button, and then of course it tapers off. And the significance of that is if you're holding on to the stylus and you're looking for the button itself is barely raised above the edge of the shaft. So what you can do instead is your thumb can go up to that groove, and that groove tells you that you're on top of the button. So it's a kind of a nice indicator of where the button is and to be able to find it without having to look for it. So I kind of like that feature on this stylus. Let's go ahead and get the old scale and do a weigh-in. All right, so the device itself weighs 234 grams. The stylus weighs 16. That's a little heavier than we're used to with styluses that tend to be about 14. So just a touch heavier. And that was my experience in holding it as well. And then if we look at the cover, we've got 90 grams there. So if we're going to go ahead and put all these pieces together, and we'll weigh that. 342 grams. Okay, so the weigh-in confirmed what I felt, which this is a very light device. And let me give you a couple comps to put this into perspective. The Nomad, which is probably the next lightest device, weighs 266 grams for the device alone. Remember, the Viwoods was 234. And if you combined the cover, the vegan cover, the stylus, as well as the device, that's the push-up stylus, it's 418 grams for all three, where the Nomad is at 342. So a pretty significant gap there. If you look at a couple other devices, for example, the Tab Ultra Mini C, that's 474 grams, much heavier. The Big Me S6 Color Plus Lite is 466 grams with the cover, stylus, and device. Again, all quite a bit heavier than this AiPaper Mini, which is coming in at 342. So a definite advantage to this device is how light it is relative to other devices in this category, despite having the slightly larger screen size. In some ways, though, this isn't a surprise. The AiPaper has the smaller battery of all those devices that I mentioned, and the correlation between weight overall and battery is pretty strong. So it's pretty clear that one of the major, probably the single most major driver of weight is the battery size. So the fact that this is the lighter of the devices is not a surprise in that regard, although I should point out the cover contributes significantly to that too, where this is 90 grams for the cover. On the Nomad, again, the next heaviest is 138. So a real tight package here by Viwoods. Only the stylus itself comes in a little bit on the heavier side. Okay, so that's basically covering the hardware. Why don't we go ahead and start this device up and see what that process is like. So the cover does have an auto sleep function. So if you close the cover, it turns the device off in sleep mode, and if you open it, it turns it on. So basically we're going to go ahead and go through the setup process, and we'll go ahead and pick English. It's looking for my Wi-Fi network. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and put the password in. I'll cut away when I'm done. All right, I just entered my password. It was pretty smooth on the keyboard, so that registered my strokes pretty well. Okay, it's already going to have an update, so I'm going to go ahead and time these updates to get a sense of how long it's going to take to do the firmware update. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, well that was something. It was a 2 gigabyte file to download. It took roughly 50 minutes to download, but then the installation took forever. It took almost 2.5 hours from the time I pressed the button to start the download to the time the device restarted with the new firmware in place. So that was quite something. I did a lot of chores in between that, and I guess we don't know if this will be the norm when the production models go out, but certainly it's suggestive that when you get your device, start the process, make sure you've got good battery life, and walk away and do other things while it's updating. But having said all that, there were no issues with the update. It went pretty smoothly with just the one update, and that was it. So here we are. Let's go ahead and continue the setup process. Now, the formal setup process we've already gone through was just to select the language. There were only 2 to choose from, and then to connect to the Wi-Fi. That was it. And then, of course, we went into the firmware update. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and see if we can log in to a couple accounts. We'll start with the Viwoods. So I'm going to go into settings, and we're going to go ahead and create an account here. And I'm going to go ahead and fill this in and see how it goes. And we'll see you at the end of the jump. Okay, so signing in was fairly easy. I just put in my email address, I put in my password, and then it sent me a code in my email, which I inputted into the device, and I logged that code in, and we're in. So that's pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and go in. I'm going to go ahead and log in to Kobo books and see how that process will work. Getting to the standard Android version of Kobo. I don't want notifications. We'll go ahead and do the quick sign in, and I'll see you at the end. Okay, I tried logging into the Kobo account. I use instead of a username and password, I do use my Google account to sign in. I had the option to do that, but then I ended up in a blank screen. I'll just show that to you here. So we'll actually get to this, and if I click on sign in with Google, this is the screen I get. So this one isn't working. I'm going to stop at this point. I'll try other sign-ins and a couple other apps, and that will be reported out in the next video. But we have run into, this is the first kind of glitch that we've run into. The haptic buttons seem to be working really well. This is the back button. This is the home button. Haven't tried the AI button yet. Let's go ahead and do that. You're supposed to hold the button down. Okay, let's just try to do a kind of a simple query here. I'm going to hold this button down. Okay, can you tell me the latest score to the Arsenal game? I let go of the button. So it's converting it. See it. Oh, interesting. It doesn't have that ability. Also, you'll notice I pressed the button down. I was talking, and it recorded everything until the timer went off. So letting go of the button didn't turn off the audio input. So we'll have to take a look at that and see if there's a way to make it a little more responsive, because there's quite a bit of a delay there. Let's do that again. Can you tell me where Arsenal plays? Okay, now it's converting. I didn't want to say anything because it was live. Okay, so it captured it perfectly. Okay, that's a good answer. But quite a bit of a gap between the time you stop talking to the time it starts the counter and then turns off. So we'll play with this more, but I just wanted to get a quick sense of what it was like. We're not going to go over all of the UI because that'll be the next video. But generally speaking, these are kind of the writing activities, and these are kind of the other app activities. So this is a calendar, planner, for example. This is where your documents would go and your apps. Where over here is where the main note-taking is taking place. The meeting-specific note-taking takes place here. And then picking is kind of this blend of, say, like sticky notes and screenshots. It basically goes in here. So that's how that's kind of laid out. And you'll notice that a lot of the icons here align with the icons on the sidebar. In addition to the sidebar, you've got a settings icon, and then you have an email icon as well. But again, we'll go through all of that in the next video as we do our visual tour. In the meantime, let's just do a quick jump into a notebook. Okay, that came up really quick. Writing here, and I'm going to go ahead and go with their fine liner with medium, and so you'll have to excuse my writing. That's all user error, but it has an interesting sound to it. There's no film on the screen that I can discern. I don't think it has an etched glass situation like we have seen with the Books Go 10.3, but there is a little bit of a sound to it. I wouldn't call it like writing on glass. Let me get that near the microphone so you can hear that. So there's a little bit of a sound to it. It's kind of hard for me to describe. I'm not exactly sure what the analogy here is. There is a touch of resistance. I want to emphasize very subtle sense of resistance as you write, which helps make it not feel like you're writing on glass. There's a little bit of a sound, but it certainly doesn't give you, the same auditory feedback as, say, the book's Note Air 3C, or, quite the level of scratchiness of the Remarkable 2. It has its own distinct sound. I'm not quite sure if I've ever seen anything quite like that. Let me go ahead and click the button and see if that's... Okay, the button's not active, so I'll have to look in the settings and see what the button does there. Doesn't seem to be working. Let's go ahead and do a lasso real quick. So we've got a few items, include AI. Or including AI. Let's go ahead and write a query down just for fun. Okay, let's go ahead and focus on that. We'll do AI, and we'll explain. So this is an example of the AI features integrated in the note-taking app. And here we go. Okay, a nice little explanation. If I click on this bar, I have the same options as I had when I did the lasso tool. So one of the things we'll be doing in the next video, and probably the video after that, is exploring how you can structure queries in the note-taking app to be able to get the type of information that might be helpful to you. So that'll be coming up. But I just wanted to get a sense of what it was like to write on it, and it's pretty good. In addition, we will again go over all the features of the note-taking app in that future video as well, but I just wanted to give a sense of what it was like to write on the thing. Oh, let me try one other thing. I'm super curious about this. Let's go ahead and see if I can swipe to add a page. Okay, I'm going to write, so you notice the AI button is here in the lower right corner, and if I'm writing, if you imagine this in 4 quadrants, if I'm writing here, here, or here, I'm not going to be touching that button. But if I'm writing over here, I might. So let me actually purposely put my hand on that button and see what happens. Okay, it didn't trigger. Let me see if the AI button actually works in the note-taking app. It does. Okay, so that's great. So it looks like it has good palm rejection, both on the screen. I've been putting my hand on the screen as I write, as well as that button. So that's an optimistic sign. Obviously in testing, we'll kind of test that out more and make sure that that is consistent. But the initial impression I have is that the button did not trigger accidentally. Okay, well that is all I'm going to cover in this particular video. Why don't we go ahead and head over to final thoughts. Okay, so that concludes the initial look at the Viwoods AiPaper Mini. We went over the hardware in quite a bit of detail, went into the setup process, and just touched on the actual experience in the software. So that's really going to wait for the next video. So what are my initial impressions, and particularly around the hardware? Pretty good. The device is really well designed. I didn't see any issues with it at all. The stylus is solid. It seemed to work well. Has a nice form factor. A little heavier, but I didn't really notice that in writing. The case is fine. It's nothing particularly notable, but it is very lightweight and it's certainly functional. So altogether, the package is a very lightweight for its form factor. That is for that 7.8 to 8.2 screen range. Very light size for that, which is pretty impressive. Of course, the trade-off potentially is around battery life, and we know the battery size is one of the lowest in this particular class. The question would then be, how does the software optimize to try to mitigate that? And we just won't know until I do actual battery testing, and that'll be a couple videos down the line. But outside of that, based on what I've seen today, I'm pretty impressed with the hardware. I really like what I'm seeing. In terms of the setup process, it's very simple. You see, again, trying to go after that remarkable audience with kind of a simpler interface. There was very little involved in that setup process before I could get going and start using the device, with of course the exception of that very, very long process of updating the firmware, which was over 2 hours. I've never seen a firmware update like that. Maybe that's because we're in pre-production, and when the production models go out, it'll be shorter. I don't know. I can only review what I have in front of me, but it was a long time. I went off and did a lot of chores during that setup process. In terms of the software, the little bit of it that we saw, just a few issues that stood out. The first one, of course, was with the logging into the Kobo app. I just wasn't able to do it when trying to log in with my Google ID. Not sure what the situation is there. I did off-screen uninstall the app and reinstall it and tried it again with notifications on, thinking that might be the issue. And it wasn't. I still had the same issue. So we'll have to look at that. I'll try logging into other apps and seeing if there are similar issues there. But that was definitely the first kind of big issue that I ran into. In addition to that, the AI had, especially when you use the AI button and you activated kind of the chatbot interface, the audio had a pretty long delay after I was done talking to the time that it registered I was done talking, and then there was a countdown. So I didn't count it exactly, but it could have even been as much as 10 seconds from the time I stopped talking to the time it finally sent the information off to the servers to be translated and interpreted. So that's a long time. I'm hopeful that there is going to be some sort of software implementation fix to that. It seems like it should be easily fixed, because taking the finger off of that button should indicate to the device, hey, we're not inputting information anymore. But it didn't seem to quite work that way in practice. Maybe it was just how I was using it. We'll find that out for sure in the next video. But that was the other issue I saw. There was one additional issue that kind of happened off screen as I was playing around with the device. And particularly in the app section, I found that it was harder to use my finger to touch and move between menus on the top bar of the screen, and it was much easier to move between menus with the stylus. I'm not sure what's happening there. There is a swipe down bar that's available, and there might be some confusion on the software in terms of me pressing a tab versus bringing that bar down. But I did see some sluggishness there, and we'll explore that more, and I'll definitely be able to report out on that in greater detail in the next video. But I did notice some of that off screen that I didn't notice when I was moving around the device on screen. And for the stuff that we did see on screen, it was quite snappy, moving into notes, moving into the app screen. Everything seemed to kind of pop up fairly quickly. I was pretty impressed with the performance. And that was mostly on the high definition mode. We didn't go into it, but there were 3 different types of modes in the software that sacrifices speed on one extreme or quality of the image on the other. And we were in the setting with the highest quality image. So even then, the device was pretty snappy. So that's pretty good to see. But again, on the software side, we're just scratching the surface, and we'll learn much more about the device in the next video. But for now, what we know for sure is the hardware looks great. It's a very optimistic start to this device. And I'm looking forward to reviewing this more. Definitely a lot of promise seen in this first look. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it performs as we really take it through the tests and start to see what it looks like under different conditions. So that is the plan going forward. I hope this video was helpful. In the description, there is a link to the Kickstarter campaign if you're interested in participating in that. Just remember that there's always risk with Kickstarter, and while it certainly seems like they have a viable product in place already, you just never know until the end of the campaign what the result of that will be. So I think it looks good, but buyer beware. So that's the end of my review. If you have any questions or thoughts, please put those into the comment section. Otherwise, hopefully in just a few days, no more than a week, we'll get a real close look at the software side of this device through the visual tour, and then you'll know everything the device can currently do and how well it performs. All right, I look forward to seeing you then.